Behind the Lines. I'm Diane Dayton. Today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. And why, you ask? Well, because it's very important and you're going to find out why. And with us right now we have Lisa Murray. You are Director of Learning and Development at Wilson Construction.
I am. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. So what exactly do you do at Wilson as the director?
I love what I do, Diane. I help build the training programs for everyone at Wilson, from project engineer to project executive roles.
Okay. Well, that encompasses a lot. How many employees?
We're at about 330 currently.
Okay, all right, that is a lot. So emotional intelligence, most of us know, obviously, IQ, but EQ, what really is that?
Yeah, a lot of studies date back into the 1940s where they were looking at what actually helps people be successful. And they found that IQ and technical skills really contributed very little to your success as compared to EQ. And so emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is really your ability to understand and manage your own emotions, but look at other people, understand their emotions. But I think the powerful part of the definition is be able to influence the emotions of others.
Wow, this gets very involved, doesn't it?
It does.
And understanding this with yourself and with others, and then how to implement certain things to be successful in your communications.
Absolutely. Communication is actually a key trait. People that are more effective communicators just have higher degrees of emotional intelligence.
Okay. All right. So let's break this down because there's so much that we need to know and understand. Where do we start with this, Lisa?
Well, it really starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
How well do we know ourselves? And it ends up being 4 key competency areas. And there's a lot of people that have influenced emotional intelligence, but 2 guys, their names are Salovey and Meyer, they're doctors, they coined the term EQ. And they found that there's 4 key areas of emotional intelligence, and if you get stronger in those areas, it just increases the likelihood you're going to have better success in relationships, at work, just in general.
So it's good professionally, it's good personally, it's just good all around. So what are these areas?
Sure. So there's reading people or perceiving emotion as one key competency, understanding emotion, managing emotion, and then using your emotions. And those 4 key areas make up a lot of different traits. And so being able to get better at one of them actually increases the likelihood that you'll improve in other areas.
How difficult is this to learn?
Well, the great things about emotional intelligence, which is why I love teaching about it, is because it's learned behavior. So IQ is really the genetic lottery that you got from your parents. You can't do much about that. I have an average IQ with a math learning disability. I can't do much about that, but I can improve my emotional intelligence. It started in childhood. So you learn it from the models around you, and then some people get feedback that maybe some of the behaviors that they have in adulthood or young adulthood aren't serving them very well, so then they make intentional areas to change. Other people don't change them, and then they just continue those negative patterns. So it's really learned, which I love because you can improve it.
You really can, but you've got to break it down. And you have to be a very active participant in this, right?
Yes. So if you get any feedback, for example, if you're a hothead, and you lose your temper a lot, whether it's yelling at your kids or losing it on people at work, then if you've gotten feedback around that, you know that that's the competency of managing emotion, and then you have to decide that is something you want to change. Some people, you can make them aware, and they just don't care.
Right.
And so I like to say that I can make people aware of all of these things, but they actually have to care to make those changes.
So you have to really motivate people too, don't you?
Yes, self-motivation is a core trait of people who are emotionally intelligent. So if you're motivated to do well, you're going to want to improve in these key areas.
Okay, so let's address a little bit more about these key areas so we really understand this, dissect them a little bit more.
Sure. So my favorite one is reading people, and it's all about not only your ability to read other people's body language, but it's how you show up. So do you know what your body language is communicating to people? And your body language is an external expression of how you internally feel. And most people don't think about that.
No.
So you may walk into a room after a long day and your kids are there and you're exhausted and you look exhausted and maybe you look like you're not too excited to see them. The kids are picking up on that, and that's negatively impacting your family. Or you come into a meeting after another meeting that didn't go so well, and now you're expressing that in the way your facial expressions and your body language.
So essentially, you need to reset when you're in that situation before you go into something else, and being aware of what you are actually showing up as, right?
Yes. So knowing that you just had a tough meeting before the next meeting, you have to kind of take a pause to say, I need to go into this meeting fresh and make sure people know I want to be there. I'm using open gestures, good eye contact, and an assertive tone. Those are all high EQ types of things to do.
Probably good posture too.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. People that sit small at a table, meaning they're trying to disappear, they're communicating that they don't want to have a voice at the table. And so it's really important to know that communication through your body language and tone, it can communicate up to 93% of what you're trying to say. Wow. So your words are very, very little, have very little to do with what you're communicating.
That's huge. And I think also your facial expressions, the tone of your voice, all of that is key. It comes into play.
It sure does. So you can have passive type of body language and communication, or more aggressive, but more healthier emotional intelligence responses are the assertive communication.
Okay. And being able to relate to someone and have them feel comfortable with you, right?
Yes. So the reading people and perceiving emotion is about connecting to others. And so there's something called mirroring. So when you're in a meeting and you're picking up on positive cues, you would mirror back those positive cues, and that helps form a deeper connection at those meetings.
Like, for instance, what we may be doing
Exactly.
together, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really, and you find that, I think, when you are really connecting with someone, you do start to do that naturally, don't you?
You do, and you also have to be careful of the opposite of that, where someone has some sort of negative body language or aggressive body language. We teach that in construction. When you're out in the field and you have maybe a subcontractor who's upset with you and they're coming to you more aggressively, you wouldn't want to have that same posture, because you can escalate a situation very quickly.
But by what you do posture-wise and open up, you can help to diffuse, can't you?
That's exactly right. So being able to diffuse a situation is someone who has very high emotional intelligence.
Oh, that's good. This is something to work toward. Give us more. What else?
So the second competency is understanding emotion. It's really like a map of emotions. Do you know how one emotion leads to the next? So say you're with someone that regularly irritates you because they're constantly telling very long, detailed stories, and you just get bored with that. It gets irritating. You know that after you're feeling irritated, you might get pretty frustrated, then you might get angry that they wasted your time. So someone with high emotional intelligence knows how they get triggered by certain emotions, and then you take it to the next level. They can proactively and preventively do things that help them be more emotionally intelligent in that moment.
Okay. How would you in that particular situation?
So knowing that you're with someone who consistently would irritate or frustrate you, you may just communicate differently.
Okay.
So instead of letting the stories go on, you may interrupt in a positive way and use something called active listening, where you kind of repeat back what they just said to help them move on.
Right.
So people that have high EQs will know that that may occur and then approach the situation differently than someone who's going to leave the situation going, I can't believe Sarah repeated herself, 100 times again, and leave it irritated.
That's huge.
It is. It really is. And it's helpful to relationships.
Absolutely. I can see that for sure. What else, Lisa?
So then there's also, perceiving how emotions take place, understanding your emotions, and then managing them. So that's all about that emotional management. When there's high pressured situations, you can remain calm in the moment and composed. And so someone who's on your team or is in your personal life that can show up in a really calm way when things are not going well can help also diffuse a situation. But it also is a good model for other people. So someone who does that is just a great model in the workplace. And parents who do that then are modeling that behavior for their children, which actually helps build resiliency in childhood.
Oh, absolutely. And then as they grow up, and how that affects the community, their workplace, school,
Absolutely.
everything. So sometimes I think it's just about taking a pause to breathe. right?
Yes. There's actually called 6seconds.org is a really good resource for this. And they talk about the 6-second pause and how that's actually the amount of time an emotion leaves your feeling part of the brain and moves off into your thinking part of the brain. So being able to pause 6 seconds helps you gain a little bit more composure. Now, people who haven't practiced this might need longer than 6 seconds. They might need a few minutes or even a whole day to come back to that email instead of pushing send.
Right.
So we do that in the workplace where we respond to an email in a way that will not be good for the relationship or even maybe for their professional jobs.
Yes.
And so pausing and thinking of a better way to respond is an emotionally intelligent response.
Wow. We got to take that in because that is so important. It really is, instead of being reactive.
It is. So Daniel Goleman, who's one of the key researchers in emotional intelligence, he coined the term the amygdala hijack. It's when you're in a situation, you get triggered, and then you over-respond. So it's an overreaction to a typical situation. And so road rage can be an overreaction. You get hijacked.
Yes.
You may do something that maybe is out of character for yourself.
Wow.
And so the 6-second pause is very connected to the hijack. So with children, if you have children in the home, being able to pause before you say that thing or yell at them, because now you're modeling poor emotional intelligence, which is learned in the home.
We're going to take a brief pause, but there's so much more we have to talk about, so stay with us. Emotional intelligence. You're watching Lancaster Community TV, LCTV 66. Welcome back to Behind the Lines. We're talking about emotional intelligence with Lisa Murray, who's the Director of Learning and Development at Wilson Construction. So Lisa, we were talking about IQ and the value of that, but EQ setting you above. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so they really found that there were key traits in individuals who were really successful. And it had very little to do with their IQ and technical skill. So IQ and technical skill is really the baseline that you need to get into any role, but it's your emotional and social skills that are going to set you apart and help you become much more successful in your role and also personally. So on average, there's been studies that show people who have high degrees of emotional intelligence actually earn about $29,000 more a year than people with lower EQ. So I think that's to note. That's noteworthy.
That's significance, yeah.
It is.
It is significant. So we were talking about 1995 as when I think EQ that was coined, correct?
Yeah, so Solovey and Meyer coined the term emotional intelligence in the 90s, but it wasn't until Daniel Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, that people started taking note of it and industries started to get very interested in what is this.
Yeah.
And there's lots of researchers, lots of books on it. Another researcher I really like is Travis Bradbury. He wrote the book EQ 2.0. And so they talk a lot about these studies they do in the workplace, that what traits make people stand apart from the rest, especially leaders.
Wow. So the industries, and especially Wilson Construction, is embracing this, and it's making a difference there. Talk about that.
Sure. I'm super proud of the fact we are very intentional around this topic. And so other industries are as well. And they really find teaching people about these core competencies and how to use them in their roles that's real applicable to what they do day in and day out is the most beneficial.
Wow. So you have a huge task with all of this. I mean, you're all over the place doing different things all the time, aren't you?
I am. So we're in 6 states. So I travel to all 6 of our locations. I go out onto our project sites, and I actually work with our teams in the trailers on these live project sites, teaching them about how to apply emotional intelligence in the field.
In an everyday situation.
In an everyday situation.
Yeah. How receptive have they been?
At first, it was, we don't really do that in construction. They didn't really realize the connection between emotions and performance. And it's not until you really break it down about how it relates to their role that they not only seem to get it for their roles, but they take it home with them. And that makes me feel really good that I might be able to have influence on people's families as well.
And that really is huge, because that's helping the community as well.
It is. And since emotional intelligence is learned, if someone from the workplace is using it in their role, but then they understand that they can actually improve it and help their children learn to have higher EQ in early stages of childhood, that's a win-win for everybody. Because then those kids will grow up and they won't have these weak areas that others have where they had poor models.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect,
Isn't
it?
A complete ripple effect.
Wow. This has huge implications, doesn't it?
It does.
So if you want to assess, how do you go about doing this?
Oh, yeah, sure. So one of my favorite books on emotional intelligence is written by an author called Harvey Duckendorf. And he wrote the book, The Other Kind of Smart. And in that book, he has a free assessment. And so you can get in his book and you can do that assessment. The other assessment is in Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by Travis Bradberry. You crack open the back of the book and there's a code and you can put that online and also get a baseline for where you fall with emotional intelligence. The only cautious thing I have to tell people about taking these assessments is if your self-awareness is really poor and you haven't gotten a lot of feedback, you actually may score yourself a little higher in some key areas than you actually naturally are. So you just have to look at those assessments as just kind of a baseline. You just get a baseline.
I'm wondering if this could be a group thing, you know, where you get together and you assess yourself, but others help assess you too, you know?
Yes, and leaders do that. So we do leadership 360s where we get feedback on our leaders. And so we get to see where do they fall in core areas of emotional intelligence, and then they all get privately coached on that.
Wow. What else do we need to know about emotional intelligence that we haven't actually addressed right at this moment?
I think one of the things that's really important to address is first you have to acknowledge any key areas that you want to improve. So if you want to get better at it, it's like a muscle. You have to work it. You have to work it every day. And it's not going to be overnight. You consider some of these behaviors are learned and embedded into some of our personalities. Daniel Goleman said, temperament is not permanent. You can actually change some of those things that you say is temperament. So things like being high-strung, you can manage your emotions if you're high-strung. I'm high-strung. I'm sure that's a big surprise. But being able to manage your emotions under pressure, you can learn. And so first you have to be intentional, have that self-awareness, and then work it like a muscle every day to try to improve it.
Yeah, you really do have to be very conscious with everything. I mean, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, right?
Yes. Every interaction you have, I like to call them EQ moments.
Okay.
And so they could be in the workplace, they could be in traffic, at the grocery store line, when your child is screaming, someone spills milk. It's all those moments that you get to decide how you're going to respond.
Yeah.
And in those moments, you're either showing high degrees of emotional intelligence or maybe low degrees of it.
Don't you think this should be taught in schools?
Yes. Schools are actually picking up on this. So in early childhood, they're finding that daycare providers and early child care centers, they're embracing this and they're trying to embed more social and emotional learning so that kids are getting it earlier and earlier now.
Yeah. That's huge because that does affect the whole learning process.
It does. If kids can't sit in their seats and
Right.
stop touching their neighbor and pay attention and listen and have good communication skills, it's going to be much harder for them to learn.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot. How long have you been with Wilson doing this?
5 years this month.
Is it really?
5 years this month.
Wow. So I'm sure you've gotten some interesting feedback. What have you heard about this program and the difference it's making?
Oh, yeah. One of the best comments I ever received was from one of our superintendents. And superintendents are the ones that are help running these construction projects. And he went through a 12-month program with other construction superintendents. And at the end, he got up and said one of the most impactful sessions was the emotional intelligence in the field. And he said, I know you want me to say that it's really impacting me here at work, and it is. He goes, but the most impact has been felt in my home.
Oh, wow.
I went home and I really stopped yelling at my little boys. And I made intentional efforts around how to connect with them on a deeper level.
That's amazing.
It felt really good.
Yeah,
it
that
felt
really did.
good.
And to see how that translates
Yes.
and back. So I know you've had some difficult situations. Is there anything that you can say about the process when it's really difficult to work with someone when they might not be getting it or they might not really want to get it? What do you really do with that, Lisa?
So you mean if someone is not understanding how this impacts them and what this is?
And not really even wanting to.
Yeah. So first I have to use my own emotional intelligence, right, to manage that because I'm passionate about it and I know it works. It makes a real difference in the lives of people and their relationships and their jobs. But what I do is I try to break it down so that it's something very specific to them. It could be personal or it could be professional, where I just give them an example and I say, just try it. And then if they try it, they come back to me and let me know whether or not, okay, I get it now. And sometimes people don't want to get it. And that's okay. But for most of my career, the masses have really taken to this idea and they can really attest to its power.
I think what you also do when you come across like this is a joint effort together. It's like you're a team with them. It's not you telling them, it's let's work on this together. And I think that also, well, that's emotional intelligence.
It is.
And you're getting them to relate and be more comfortable with you, to be receptive.
Team emotional intelligence is huge. So we all contribute to our team's emotional score. So if we have one person on the team that's low, it does drag the team down. So just being aware of how that impacts your team or your family is key to EQ.
How does the team then help that one person?
By modeling it.
So they essentially will see that and start to feel that. And become a part of it.
Well, emotions are energy.
Absolutely.
And we pick up on the dynamics and energy of other people. And so as long as the team stays really true to their high EQ, that can also pull that other person along. Not always, but we always say we don't want someone else to then drag our EQ down to a level where we get irritated and disgruntled and now we're contributing to the low EQ.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating and it's so important work that you're doing. And I applaud Wilson Construction for hiring someone like you to make a big difference in the business as well as the personal lives too. It really, really is huge.
Well, thank you, Diane.
Yeah, it really is huge. And also, why don't we just mention the fact that it's all employee owned now, right?
It is. We're fully employee owned. Yes, we're an ESOP, and it just makes us all really contribute to Wilson in a unique way.
Yeah, and I think that also, with the emotional intelligence and being an active part of this, an ownership role, says a lot too.
Makes you want to be more highly emotionally intelligent, which makes the company more successful and makes the whole team more successful.
All right, I feel like a high five. Good job. Thank you so much for taking time today, Lisa, and discussing emotional intelligence because it does affect all of us and it can make a difference. I'd like to say thank you for joining us today too. I'm Diane Dayton, reminding you to look behind the lines because you might be surprised what you find. Thank you.